Hey guys, how's it going? My name is Grant and I'm the host of Remington Graphics, and one of the most annoying things in any graphics software is the amount of time it takes to render. Whether you're doing something in Blender, After Effects, sometimes even Photoshop, things can take a long time to render. So in order to save you some time, I figured I'd go ahead and show you guys how to optimize your renders in Cycles. So I'm going to be using this scene I created a while ago. It's called Prince of the Universe, and some of you have seen it. It was in the opening clip. It's that little boy standing with the big open glass panes in front of him. By default, this is what the scene looks like, right? We got a big open window, we got two paintings, we got the little child, and then we got just a 2D plane back here with an image on it. And it's a pretty simple scene. So right now, this is rendering with all of Blender's default settings. So let's go ahead and render this and see how it comes out. So while this is rendering, I'm just gonna go ahead and go over some important details. For one, I'm rendering on my CPU at the moment, which is an i7-4770S quad-core, I think it's 3.5 gigahertz. I'm rendering at 960 by 480 resolution. I am currently also rendering with 75 samples. So actually this scene as well also has 258,000 faces, so it's a pretty high poly scene here. So we'll see how long it takes. Right now we're at 31 minute and 29 seconds of render time. So we'll see how long this takes, and I'll be back when it's done. So you can see that the time took 2 minutes the frame took 2 minutes and 4 seconds to render. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and open up a text editor down here. I'm just gonna keep track of the time. So this is with CPU. Actually, we'll just call this 1. So our first trial was 2 minutes and 4 seconds, all right? Now that we have that logged, we're gonna go ahead and enable GPU rendering. Now, if you have a graphics card in your computer, Blender doesn't use it by default, in case you didn't already know that, and you should probably set it up because it speeds up rendering. Just a spoiler here, it speeds it up a lot. So in order to enable your graphics card, come up to File, go to User Preferences, and in the little System tab over on the end here, there should be an option that says CUDA or OpenCL. Click CUDA or OpenCL and then select your graphics card if it's not already selected, and click Save User Settings. Then over in the Properties menu here under the Render tab, we can change the device from CPU to GPU compute, and it will render a ton faster. Now, if you don't already have a graphics card in your computer and you do have a computer that supports a graphics card, so pretty much any desktop, just look at how much faster this is going. Look at how much faster. If you can support a GPU, I would strongly recommend getting one because Cycles is very intense on graphics, and the GPU will help your rendering speeds a ton. Now, if you're on a laptop and you can't have a GPU running, unfortunately, there's not much I can do for you unless you upgrade either to a laptop with a graphics card built in, like a gaming laptop, or if you choose to do something like go to PC or build your own. All right, and we're done, and you can see up here the time is so much quicker, 1 minute and 17 seconds. So that cut off just a little bit less than a minute off of our render time, which is absolutely phenomenal. Especially because, I mean, think about rendering 100 of these. If you cut off a minute, you literally have your render time. It's just absolutely amazing. All right, so I already made a slot for 3 because there are a lot of other improvements that we can do here. So let's go ahead and come down here to this area that says light paths in the properties menu. And basically what light paths are is it's the amount of times light can bounce. Now I briefly went over this in my, 11 overlooked features in Blender, and well, we're going over it again. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna set the max bounces to 6, minimum to 0. We're gonna boost the diffuse, actually we're gonna leave diffuse and glossy at 4. We're gonna drop transmission down to 4. We're gonna change transparency to 8 and the minimum transparency to 0. Now, sometimes if you drop these too much, it will cause certain things in your scene not to render properly. So if I were to have 50 different transparent objects lined up in a row, and this is set to 6, the light would only penetrate through 6 of those objects. I'd have to send it to 50 for it to penetrate through all those objects, just so you guys know. So if you do see some weird black parts of your image that aren't supposed to be there, you might want to increase the transparency or light bounces anywhere. I found these settings to be pretty much universal, and they work pretty well anywhere. In addition, we're going to turn off reflective and refractive caustics, and we're going to change filter glossy up to 2. If you'd like, you can turn off shadows, which basically causes a very minute change in the actual quality of the render. I just leave it on because it really doesn't impact render speed that much. So now with our light paths optimized, let's go ahead and render again and see how much it optimized it now. right. And you can see that we effectively cut another, what is that, 20, 30, almost 30 seconds off of our render time. So this one is 0.50, right? Actually, we'll round up. So 51 seconds. So you can see just how much, just changing a few things in our scene has just absolutely changed the way that our scene renders speed-wise, but it's still the same render that we saw before. So let's go ahead and do one more thing, and that's changing the tile size. Now, if we come down here to the Performance tab, there is this option called Tiles down here. Now, tiles are basically the size of the individual thing. So when you see those little squares dancing around on the screen, like, let's see if it finishes, there we go. Okay, well, half of this is one tile in this case. It's a 64 by 64 pixel area, right? So certain graphics cards and certain CPUs will render differently based upon these settings. Usually for CPU renders, you want something low. So if I were rendering on CPU, I'd set this to 16 by 16. But since I'm rendering on a GPU, I'd set this to something like 256 by 256 because GPUs really perform better when you have a larger tile size. Now, if you don't want to have to experiment with it and find out what's best for your system, there's a really awesome add-on built into Blender. So if I come up to here, user preferences, go to add-ons, and I type in tile size, there's this add-on called auto tile size. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna check this right here, and I'm gonna click save user settings, and you can see that added in a little menu down here called auto tile size. And what auto tile size does is, as you can see, it optimizes it for the render. So now when we render, let's go ahead and see how much faster this is. And there you have it, 22.79 seconds. Holy crap. So let's actually 0.23. So you can see just how much all these changes really add up to speed up your render. It's absolutely insane. And with something like this, you could render 5 different frames of this easily, actually 6 different frames, couldn't you? You could render 6 frames of this in the time that we rendered 1 with the default unoptimized settings. Now there is one more thing that we can do here, and it's something that isn't really going to impact your speed too much unless, well, I'll get to that in a second. Each individual light here has a bunch of different settings, right? So I have 3 different lights surrounding the boy alone. So this light, as you can see here, it has 2 different settings we're gonna look at. We're gonna look at multiple importance and the max bounces. Basically, the max bounces are already pretty limited because of what we did with the other settings, but if we drop these, it will slightly improve the render times. So it'll be very minimal. And another thing you should do with these is turn on multiple importance. And turning on multiple importance will help get rid of fireflies, which are those little extra bright pixels that are just floating around in your render for no reason whatsoever. So if I turn all these into multiple importance, drop the bounces down to 4, our render should come out looking a lot better. Well, at least somewhat better, and a tiny little bit faster. Now, you can also change these. My dog is in the room. We can also change these settings for the world. So if you're using an HDR map, this is where it actually comes in handy. HDR maps, if you guys don't know what they are, they're basically these really super awesome, I forgot I reset Blender. They're these really awesome sky maps, right? That just, they make everything look beautiful. Anyway, if we come down to the settings here, we can change the bounces of this to 4 or something similar. I'd actually recommend keeping this higher than your other bounces. But then you can also toggle the multiple importance, which should be on by default. In addition, you can also change the map resolution, which changes how good the resolution is of the map or the texture that you're using. And dropping that can help speed up render times as well. So let's go ahead and render this with our final settings. It shouldn't be too much different than the previous one. So if you remember 22.79 here, we'll go down to the millisecond here, 22.79. And let's see if this speeds it up at all, or if it's just, I'm guessing it's still gonna be 23 seconds, but you know, we'll see if it speeds it up at all or not. Oh, it actually slowed it down. What do you know? I don't know why that happened, honestly. It might just be that different renders do different things and different calculations take place. But there you have it. You know, there's so many things you can do to just simplify your render. And think about it. This scene, when I first made it, was completely unoptimized. I rendered it at 800 samples and I had to render it overnight. It took, I think, 6.5 hours just to render the final image. Now, if I had known all these tips before, well, if we look at this here, 204 to 23 seconds, which is 1/6 of the time, right? So let's 6 hours times 60 minutes, right? So that's 360 minutes divided by 6. 60 minutes. I could have limited my render time to an hour. And the multiple importance trick, which is actually enabled by default now, that 60 seconds, or that 60 minutes actually could have been lowered as well if I had dropped my samples, because having those extra, or the multiple importance on, means less fireflies, which means less samples. So I probably could have done something like 200 samples. Now let's go ahead and see if I render this at 300 samples, all right? And we're gonna render it as full resolution, so 100%, so 1920 by 1080. With all these settings, we're gonna see the total amount of time it takes, and I bet that it's slower than the initial time it took to render the first image. I actually changed my mind. We're gonna go 200 because 300 is overkill. Well, it doesn't necessarily look like we're gonna be able to make that 2 minutes and 4 second mark, but you can see just how much improved it is. The fact that we can get this much of the image rendered in the same amount of time is quite impressive. As you can see, we just broke it. I'm gonna let this render the rest of the way though, just so we can see how long it takes on point. We're gonna see, I'm guessing around 3 minutes. Well, it looks like it finished and I was almost spot on, 3 minutes and 9 seconds. So although it didn't beat it, wouldn't you rather have a full resolution, much better looking render in 3 minutes than a really crappy looking one in 2? Well, there you have it. Anyway, that's all I've got for you guys today in this video. Thank you all for watching, and if you guys know of any really awesome tips and tricks to speed up renders in Blender, be sure to drop it down in the comment section. I'd love to see it, a bunch of other people would love to see it, and you'll help us all out. One more thing before I leave, if you really don't feel like rendering a really long animation, check out Sheep at Render Farm. It's free. It's really cool. Anyway, thanks again for watching. Be sure to hit the like button down below if you enjoyed this video, and hit the subscribe button if you want to be notified when I upload videos. Anyway, thanks for like the 3rd time for watching, and I'll see you guys later. Adios.